I want to bring into the conversation now one of the members of Congress who is most qualified to talk about this matter, specifically because he is an esteemed constitutional scholar. Maryland Congressman, member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, was booked to be here tonight to talk about the January 6th investigation and other matters before Congress. But, Congressman, I have to start tonight, at least, by talking to you about this breaking news. Thanks very much for joining us.
Sure. I'm delighted to be with you, Rachel.
Have you had a chance to look at Mr. Gerstein's reporting at Politico or at all at the ruling that has been published tonight from the court?
Yes, I just sped read the decision. I found it astonishing and appalling. The basic legal claim here is that the word abortion doesn't appear in the Constitution. And of course, it doesn't appear in the Constitution. But the Supreme Court in 1973 in Roe versus Wade hinged its reasoning on Griswold versus Connecticut, which was a 1965 decision by the Supreme Court striking down a law banning birth control, even for married couples in Connecticut. And the Supreme Court said that the Due Process Liberty Clause includes a right to privacy over intimate decision-making. So the point is that Justice Alito's decision would apply also, presumably, to the right to privacy in contraception. And we know, of course, there is a right-wing war on contraception now. But if Casey is to fall, if Roe versus Wade is to fall, then Griswold versus Connecticut presumably is to fall as well, because the word contraception or birth control doesn't appear in the Constitution. Indeed, the phrase right to privacy doesn't appear in the Constitution. So this would appear to be an invitation to have, Handmaid's Tale type anti-feminist regulation and legislation all over the country. And all of that is perfectly in keeping with Justice Alito's opinion, which admittedly I just read in like the last 20 minutes. But to my mind, it situates the trajectory of the American right in where, Fox News and Tucker Carlson want to go, which is to make us in the image of Hungarian illiberal democracy now, to keep elections going where people can be whipped up about various scapegoats, but to carve out and destroy the freedoms and the rights of the people. And that's where the right wing seems to be going with this decision. And the Supreme Court, if it actually goes through with this majority draft opinion, which somehow is leaked out and which does look to me completely real, or at least an extraordinary forgery of what a Supreme Court decision by Justice Alito looks like and sounds like. But if it does go forward with it, I believe that the court will have returned to its historic baseline of being a reactionary conservative institution to the far right of everything else at the federal level in the government. And, it's still got this lingering faint halo around it from the Warren Court period with Brown versus Board and Roe versus Wade, Griswold versus Connecticut, Miranda versus Arizona. But for most of our history, take all the way up to the Civil War, the Supreme Court, for example, never did anything for enslaved Americans other than to cement and constitutionalize the system of slavery in the Dred Scott decision and to declare that African Americans have no rights that the white man is bound to respect, and to declare that the Constitution is indeed a white man's compact. And then even after the Civil War and the Reconstruction Amendments, the court articulated American apartheid in Plessy versus Ferguson, approving Jim Crow arrangements throughout most of the country. So there was that brief few decade period with the Warren Court, but then with the Burger Court, the Rehnquist Court, and now the Roberts Court, the Supreme Court has returned to that traditional baseline. And all it means to me, at least in my mind, and admittedly I'm speaking as a person in politics, but we need to turn out the vote like we've never turned out the vote before. The people need to stand up and defend democratic institutions and the rights of the people, because the Supreme Court is certainly not doing anything for us.
Congressman Raskin, let me ask you a question that I posed to Josh Gerstein, the reporter who broke this story at the top of the hour. From the ruling, the way that it is written, and again, with the caveat that this is a what appears to be a first draft opinion, and it will likely go through many other iterations and lots of changes before we ultimately get the ruling. But based on what we've got, this remarkable leak of a first draft, and the way that Justice Alito has constructed this argument. If this survives if this mostly survives intact, is there anything here that would prevent Republican-controlled states, or indeed a Republican-controlled Congress and a Republican president, from outlawing abortion full stop in every instance, making it a crime that, put doctors in prison, potentially put women in prison? Is there any new restriction on the ability of the government to force women to give birth that is recognized here, or is it an elimination entirely of that restriction?
It is an elimination entirely, as I read it. I mean, the good thing about Roe versus Wade or Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was that it established a balance between the liberty of the woman to seek reproductive health care in consultation with her physician and her family. It was a private choice. It was not up to state legislators and to members of Congress. But there was a balancing test against the developing fetus, and so that at a certain point under Roe versus Wade, for example, in the third trimester, it could be banned entirely, and the decision could be regulated in the interests of maternal and fetal health in the second trimester. But this abolishes the balancing test entirely and says, because abortion's not mentioned in the Constitution, and presumably there is no right to privacy, according to Justice Alito, the legislatures can do whatever they want. So, look, I serve on the Judiciary Committee and the Oversight Committee. We've had lots of hearings about this. The same right-wing lawyers who filed all these cases and are always filing the amicus briefs, they don't take the position that there's any kind of balancing. They say it's perfectly fine for the legislatures to prohibit the procedure entirely, including in cases of rape of the woman, including in cases of problematic medical issues that might come up. They say that that's just up to the state legislatures. So if there's a move on right now to pass a federal law that would categorically prohibit abortion, the only thing stopping them from doing that will be the votes in the House and the votes in the Senate and the potential veto of the President of the United States, because they don't see any jurisprudential, any constitutional impediment to doing that.
Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin, member of the Judiciary Committee, a constitutional scholar. Sir, thank you very much for being here. I know we had to change gears quickly with you tonight. I really appreciate you reading the opinion and joining us on such short notice.
Thank you much, Rachel. I'll take the rain check on January 6th.
Indeed. We'll have you back soon, sir. Thank you.